I'm Kyle Malnati, your host of the Calibrate Real Estate Podcast. At Calibrate, we exist to help people create generational wealth through real estate. My personal mission is to encourage, empower, and educate you by sharing best practices from business leaders that are proven winners. Broadcasting from the Mile High City, thank you for tuning in to yet another episode of the Calibrate Real Estate Podcast. We're so excited to have a real estate investing expert in our midst. As many of you know, my primary profession is selling investment property here in Denver, and we've got an amazing expert that's written a fantastic resource. Edna Keep, welcome to the show. We're so excited to talk about 90 Days to 5K, your online book about becoming a successful real estate entrepreneur. Welcome to the Calibrate Real Estate Podcast.
Thanks so much, Kyle. It's my pleasure to be here.
Well, Edna, I was just immediately drawn in. I always look through as I'm preparing for any podcast in a book. I look through the table of contents and say, okay, what couple of sections or maybe what whole chapter really resonates with me. And I feel like in this particular real estate market, but just in any type of sales profession or entrepreneur endeavor, that mindset is really important. And there's a lot of work that you have to do to really take care of your mindset. And I just zeroed right into chapter 4. And I'd love to ask you several series of questions about mindset. The first thing I've got to ask, because I think a lot of people know about fixed mindset versus growth mindset. Have you at one point really adopted a growth mindset, but that had a fixed mindset before, or have you always sort of been geared towards that growth mindset?
I think a little geared towards growth, Kyle, although have been stuck at different times in my life with a fixed, even though I'd grown to one area, struggle to get out of that area, and a lot of times I think that happens when we already have a certain amount of success that I know in my case, more success than I ever dreamed possible, and then hit that level and then was stuck there for a long time because it was like, well, how do you go beyond what was like a huge dream to you, right?
Yeah, that's a great perspective. And I think of a couple of quotes that maybe become cliche, but you think of the quote of new levels, new devils. That's kind of like the big thing, or what got you here can't get you there. Yes. And then just the idea of plateauing in general. So I think that's natural. Yeah. But you give us several very good pointers about what to think about and then how to react when you may feel like you're going back and forth between one or the other. Just a reminder for some that may be brand new to this concept. I know my kiddos in elementary school, they teach this actually in elementary school now, but it's kind of the old John C. Maxwell 20 years ago, a great book he wrote, Failing Forward, which is, it's not that, what do you do to avoid failure? It's you are going to fail, and it's how do you profit? How do you capitalize on those failures? How do you learn? And so growth mindset, know that the hardest things that you're going to be doing in life, you got to work at them. And you're just enjoying that. You're going to value things that you need to accomplish, that humans can develop through hard work and effort, that you're not just born with, this ability to be successful or not. You can work towards being more successful, your self-awareness, all these different things. The questions that I thought were really interesting that you posed to your reader is, do you believe intelligence is a fixed trait or something that can be developed? And I'd love for you to comment on that real quick, because I think when you're working on real estate investments, there are things that you just don't know until you experience them. And so how have you found with some of your coaching clients of sort of manufacturing some of these experiences versus kind of on the job training or real life failure that could have, 5 or 6 zeros behind those failures?
Well, one of the favorite books I ever read, Kyle, was Robert Kiyosaki's book, Why Do A Students Work for C Students and B Students Work for the Government? And I was always a C student. So I absolutely love that book, because that really made me realize that even though being a C student in school, there's no recognition for that. You're just average, right? But being a C student in the real world, there's so many success traits that we have that A students don't have. And that really understanding that whole concept and allowed me to be more me than I'd ever allowed me to be in the past, because you always kind of, if you don't fit in quite at school, your mark's not as good, like you're looked down on. And now I realize that that stuff that I didn't give me 80s and 90s in school is the exact stuff that's allowing me to really succeed at this point in my life.
It's a great reminder. It's good for those of us who may have slacked off in high school. I'm definitely one of them. But then really pick things up, a lot of learn from experience, a lot of learn by failure, learn by trial and error. I definitely came of age closer to my junior and senior year of college and really kind of figured things out at that point. Mm-hmm. Edna, you bring up very good questions that your readers and your coaching clients should ask themselves about their mindset as it relates to money. And I've read several books about mindset and money because it is something that is, like it or not, it's ingrained in us at a very young age. And sometimes we may have other people that are influences in our life. They could be parents, they could be older siblings, they could be someone that you pass on the path through life, and they say something to you and it sort of just becomes hardwired. And so I want to run through these questions. Then I want to ask some of the favorite questions that you have in this little model here, okay?
Yeah, absolutely.
So question number 1 is, has money caused you discomfort? Question 2, are you satisfied with your life? Question 3, how do you view yourself? Question 4, what are your earliest memories of money? Question 5, how do you feel about wealth? 6, are you comfortable talking about money? 7, did you consider yourself rich or poor while growing up? 8, does money play a central theme in your thinking? 9, how would you rate your level of stress around money? 10, was money a source of conflict growing up? Those are some pretty deep questions, but I think as people start digging around, what have you found to be maybe of those 10 kind of the top 2 or 3 that really get people stuck on where they're feeling like they may be in a rut from a mindset standpoint as it relates to their money?
Well, the fact is there's a lot of subconscious beliefs that we all hold, and a lot of those are planted into our mind between the ages 0 and 4. And if our parents were having financial difficulty at that point in their life, even if they became wealthy and rich and everything later on, a lot of that stuff just is there as a belief that you have that you don't even realize you have. I catch people all the time saying things like, oh, that rich person is so bad, and so they did this and they did that, and that's how they got to places in their life. Well, you know what? That's a mindset. And as long as you believe that you got to be bad to be wealthy, you will, or you won't become wealthy. There's just a way to go. So you really have to examine those beliefs first and think to where they came from. And like I said, lots of them are so unconscious. Unless we start becoming aware of what we think about, you can go through your whole life sabotaging yourself on something you learned before you were 4 years old. Isn't that sad?
It is sad. And it wasn't like you tried to do that. That was just something that you grew up in. And so you give some positive suggestions to your readers about how you can actually change your mindset, some practical steps. The thing that I really latched onto is that money is energy. It made so much sense when I read it, but I've actually never heard someone say that before. So where did you come across that concept, and how do we relate to money like energy, or like, I never really thought about that, but it's very profound.
Well, it's just the studies I've done over the years with different coaches I've worked with, but really, and I'm going to use my story as an example, Kyle. I was a single mom at age 16. And being a C student, I didn't go to university. And so I just got a job and I was earning $1,200 a month. Well, now one tenant can pay me $1,200 a month, and we have 778 doors. So to give you an idea, you do not go from $1,200 a month to $1,200 a door per month without changing your mindset to start with. I never felt poor as a kid. We always had food and whatever, clothes and everything we had. So I had some benefits that maybe some other people don't have, but really understanding money also comes from our imagination. If you can acquire the idea, because it's an idea that'll change your life. I acquired an idea that I wanted to earn $100,000 a year when I was earning $1,200 a month. And a lot of people thought I was absolutely crazy. Like, Edna, how do you think you're going to do that? You're a single mom. You already have a good job. You work 9 to 5 in a clinic. What makes you think you could do better than that? And I went, because I read books and I read the Think and Grow Rich. And if other people can do it, I can do it. Oh, you're just dreaming. You're crazy. And you got to learn to live within your means. And I went, you know what? If I got to learn something, I'll learn how to be rich. I don't want to learn how to live within my means. Like, really, you think I should learn to live on $1,200 a month? You're crazy. So you don't get here with that same level of thinking. I've hired coaches. I've spent hundreds of thousands of dollars to get to where I am today. You don't get it quickly by figuring it all out yourself either. So you mentioned it earlier, but it's a saying I have all the time too. New level, new devil. Every time you want to grow or move to a new, you need a different coach, or you need a mindset shift. It's not going to happen without actually working hard on making it happen. So money is energy. Money comes from our imagination. If you cannot imagine that you're going to earn $100,000 a year or $100,000 a month, you won't. So it starts there. And how do you get to that point, Kyle? You get there by being around people who've done it. You don't get to 100,000 a year or 100,000 a month if you're hanging around with people who are making way less. You don't. Your network is your net worth, and you have to wrap your head around that. Being around like-minded people doing the same thing you are, or better, is where you got to go. So that's where that whole concept of energy, even being aware, is an energy. You got to be aware that it's possible. And how I first became aware is I had a cousin that was in banking. So I knew it was something to do with money. That's all I knew. And he was rich. Everybody in our family said he was rich. I had no idea how much money he made or anything like that. But that's where I got the idea, well, I got to start working with money to become rich. So that's actually how I ended up being a financial advisor. I didn't know what he did as a banker, but I became a certified financial planner, and things kind of took off from there.
It's I didn't know that. And that's such a similar path to how I got into commercial real estate and real estate brokerage and real estate investing, is that my wife's cousin became my mentor. And as a 16-year-old, my wife and I are dating in high school, and he just was, 4 or 5 years older than us. You just knew that he had kind of that it factor. And then when I was in college, he was out of college and working, and I just kind of started talking to him. I'm like, you're real successful. What do you do? Well, I work in commercial real estate brokerage. And then he kind of showed me the path of how to be a successful broker when I started working with him after college. And it just takes that one person to really kind of give you that, like, wait a second, you seem to have it figured out. For those that are maybe younger that are listening in, how would you suggest someone approach someone else who's been there, done that, successful, and maybe they don't have a lot of money to actually hire a professional coach? Obviously, we'll talk about your coaching program, Edna, but what are some suggestions that you would say to a young person that is really intrigued about the idea of kind of learning the business and surrounding themselves with someone that's more successful, but doing so in such a way that's very dignified and appropriate, so that they're not, really kind of taking a lot of that person's time?
Yeah. You know what? Get around like-minded people in any way, shape, or form. I still remember one of the fellows that I do some real estate deals with. We just bought 178 doors in Memphis, Tennessee. I was just on a podcast with him, and I was listening to him say he got around some successful realtors when he was working in a bar. The realtors would come to the bar to drink. And he could just see that they were so successful. And he was just a young guy, 17, 18. And he started hanging around with this one guy, because I guess he liked to listen to how he talked at the bar. And he said, how can I work for you? He says, well, I don't really have anything for an 18-year-old kid. Like, what can you do? He says, you bust tables or whatever it was. And he says, I don't care. I'll do anything. He ended up with a job, not paid, moving those signs. Remember when you guys used to have to put the big signs in and that was his first, just to get around people he wanted to emulate and be like. So that's one thing. Now, you can't expect that these really busy, ultra successful people are going to take hours and hours out of their day to teach you for free. So, save your money to get a coach, because that's the easiest way. But if you don't have the money, at least be around like-minded people, because if you're around like-minded people, you'll start to adopt what they're doing. The first coach I ever hired was in 1999. I was actually just reintroduced to him recently, Dan Sullivan. He just wrote a new book called Who, Not How. And it's all about when you're growing. It's not about asking yourself, how do I grow bigger? It's who do I need to add to my team to grow bigger? And so I read this book and it was so good, but it made me think back to the days that I hired him in 1999 when I was a new financial advisor. And I sat in our company was bought by a larger company. And I sat in a room of people who were producing $1 million a year as a financial advisor. And they kind of put us sporadically between these people so we could be around them. And one of the things a coach was talking from the stage, and he says, how many people in the audience have a coach? And I looked around. All the top producers we had been introduced to had a coach. And I hired a coach that weekend. I went like, I see it. I see the writing on the wall. I'm going to hire a coach. And I mean, it was a stretch for me at the time. I had to pay $8,000 and travel to, fly and stay there for a weekend. It was 3 days and then travel time. And, so it was a big stretch for somebody who was just earning $100,000 a year. But I decided I wanted to be one of those people that was earning $1 million a year,
I love the shout out to Dan Sullivan. My mentor actually was a part of Strategic Coach for quite a long time. So I actually am familiar with Dan and have read some of his books, and I've never met him, but I was taught by someone that really valued Strategic Coach. And the more I get to learn about that program, the more people I meet that are a part of it. Such a cool thing to take a look at, because you do a deep dive, and then you go back to your profession for the next 90 days, work on your top 3 things, and go back to the deep dive. And there's something about that travel of I'm going to go out of my comfort zone, out of my home, stay somewhere for a day and a half, 2 days, but do it on the regular and then have that accountability. That's such a great coaching program. And there's lots of great coaching programs out there.
I worked with him for 3 years at that time. And look, thinking about it again, because he just has different concepts and different ways of thinking about stuff. One of the concepts, if you haven't followed him too much, he's got this lifetime extender where he's chosen that he's going to live till he's 156. Well, when you start adding those kind of timeframes onto your life, all of a sudden it's like, what else could I accomplish? Because lots of people in their 50s and 60s start thinking, yeah, I did it all already. Oh my gosh, you're so kidding yourself. And he's in his 70s, very active, even a more successful program now than he had back then. And active every day, because he's in his 70s. He's going to live until he's 156. So he's not even halfway through his life. And what a great way to think,
Well, like you said about mindset, you've got to think that before it happens, and vice versa. If you're like, oh, I'm going to target 100 years old or 90 years old or 80 or whatever it is based on life expectancies, you may be selling yourself short. You may actually be programming your mind that that's when I'm supposed to deteriorate. So it's fascinating. And with modern medicine and all these different things, who knows what will happen, but it's great that he's got that perspective, that long-term viewpoint. I think that there's so much here about mindset that I want to make sure that I don't forget something. And I didn't know about Strategic Coach when I was reading your book. Now that I do, I think some of that's going to be coming out with it. But my mentor, Matt, constantly, and I'll still meet with him on the regular, even though we don't work together on a day-to-day basis anymore, Matt would constantly remind me to do something which you highlighted, which is emotionally detaching yourself from your business. And I think that this makes a lot of sense when you're outside looking in, but we are emotionally attached, right? We have so much pride and so much energy. And I was having a conversation with our podcast producer yesterday just about that. And she's like, it's very important that our business is connected to us and personal. And so what do you do to take that step back and that approach of not being so in the mix and so personally attached to the outcome?
Well, first of all, I realized that it's not all me. it's lots of times there's team members that are responsible, and you have to let them be responsible too. So it's not you. In real estate, Kyle, you'll recognize this. Sometimes markets change and shift, and some people take that as personal. Oh, I caused that, or at least I caused the challenge. You didn't. So you have to let some of that beating yourself up thing go. And I've gotten very good at that over the years. There's still times, when I tend to, because we all think that we should be able to market time and everything like that, but you can't. I found that out when I was selling mutual funds. A lot of salespeople would stop themselves from selling because they felt like the market was going to drop, or they'd been beat up because the market did drop. Well, you can't stop. You can adapt, but you can't stop. So I think that's the biggest thing people need to do, is stop beating themselves up for a lot of stuff that's out of their control, and just keep moving forward, because it's staying in action that helps you grow. And being around like-minded people that are going through some of the same challenges as you also helps, because you realize, yeah, I didn't cause that market correction. Other people who I admire and love and would do business any day of the week with, they're having the same challenges we are. And that's how I think we have to approach that.
It's great advice. And as you're talking about building a team and group of people around you, in your book, 90 Days to 5K, in chapter 2, you actually start to help people identify that maybe weren't a part of financial services or a part of real estate already, of just the not so secret sources of private money. And you go through all these different things. There's networking events, there's fellow real estate investors, coworkers, et cetera. But you've actually been coaching aspiring real estate investors on how they can source deals, how they can create capital, and how they can invest in something that is using some other people's equity. And what are some tips that you have for people that are aspiring investors that may say, look, I don't have a lot of money, but I got a lot of time and energy, and I've got a lot of gumption. What are some things real quick, do's and don'ts of working with other people's capital and doing so in such a way that you can continue to be successful?
Well, a lot of people think, Kyle, that there's lots of people out there with all this money, and this is just me, and I want your money. That you have to change your mindset first and foremost into, and it takes a while to get to this point. Hey, I have the gold here. You just got the money, but I can do something with your money that's going to make you very, very happy. And that confidence shift comes through when you're properly educated and surrounded again by like-minded people, because that's what I think holds most people back. Oh, you got the money, could you give me some? No, your confidence has to be, I got a deal that you're going to want to be part of. And that shift alone, it doesn't happen without being around the like-minded people and understanding the strategies to make that happen.
That's good advice. And I think that once you start to open your mind to this idea, it starts to manifest, and you get selective perception, which is a good thing, where all of a sudden you start seeing sources of it. And once you get your first deal put together, all of a sudden I'd imagine the second and the third are much easier.
Oh, yeah. The first one's the hardest.
Yeah.
Even if it's a single family home, it's the hardest, I remember being there, and I like to help my students. I tell them, I'll walk you through, hold your hand through your first 2-3 purchases. You won't need me after that. But it does start with mindset. And if they can't wrap their head around that, then they're pretty much dead in the water as far as I'm concerned.
Well, and Ed, just a next level question about going from financial services to investment real estate and multifamily. How did you find, because it's a pretty segmented niche, and it is a little bit almost old school, or like a lot of people say, kind of the multifamily investing world can be a little bit like the Wild West, because there's not nearly as much oversight like you would have with the SEC or FINRA or any of these other things when it comes to securitized investing. Yeah. So how do you find it? What's an accredited investor? What does all that look like for people that aren't familiar with how you kind of get into the multifamily space?
Well, I actually, like, as a financial advisor, we were very regulated. So yeah, you're right when you say it's a little bit of the Wild West, but once people understand, and this is my position, I was sold mutual funds and life insurance. I was taught by mutual fund companies and life insurance companies. That was it. They didn't put anybody else in front of us. I never seen a realtor. I never seen a real estate investor until I started looking outside the norm. I was actually introduced to real estate by a very successful investor that invested also with me, but was taking money out of their portfolio and invested in real estate. I'm going, what are you doing? Why do you want to invest in an asset class that pays you 3%? And he goes, oh, Edna. And he started teaching me. And, and it was just in a 1 hour conversation. He didn't spend a lot of time with me, but I listened. And then I went and got my education through the Rich Dad Poor Dad. Once I understood real estate, couldn't even sell mutual funds anymore. But that's when I realized too that my blinders were on. All I was taught, all I knew was this. And once I opened it up, like I said, I couldn't even sell mutual funds anymore. So that is the thing too, being around like-minded people. He opened my eyes, and then I started studying and diving deeper and deeper into it. So it's not as regulated. I don't think it needs to be as regulated either, because real estate is real estate. You're not selling some hairy-fairy dream. You buy a property, you run it how it's supposed to be run, you're going to make money. And long-term buy and hold, which is our favorite, also very forgiving long-term. But deals don't always happen in the first 5 years. You got to hold on to that to really, really build wealth. And you can buy cash flowing properties that are cash flowing today and have challenges that they're not cash flowing 5 years later. But you can't just throw in the towel. You ride it through, you work it out, and you learn what has to happen. That's why, lots of people will say, how many cycles have you been through? Because you're going to go through great times, not so great times, great times, not so great times. How do you handle all that? How do you handle all that? That, again, is where mindset comes into the equation. If you're the one who's going to stick your head in the sand and bury yourself until the markets turn around and get better, well, you're just going to get yourself in more and more trouble.
Absolutely right. And I think back to my younger days reading Rich Dad Poor Dad when I was a finance major, a young guy at the University of Wyoming, and just really feeling like in finance, part of my curriculum was real estate related, and part of it was very much equity and stocks and bonds. And I just love the tangible nature of real estate. It just is, it's such a simple yet wonderful business. That's why I've always gravitated towards it. And obviously you can make money a lot of different ways, but real estate's a great tool in your tool belt. All right, Edna, we're nearing the end of our show, and I ask all of our guests 3 questions. They're a little bit rapid fire, but they're deep. So I'm excited. You ready for them?
I am.
Okay. So first things first, before we get through those questions, what's a great way that people can connect with you, Edna, online through your coaching program, and how can they download your book?
That's all going to be in the show notes, but my website has all of that as well, ednakeep.com. I'm on Facebook, Coach Edna Keep, and I'm on YouTube. I've got Google ads running. They can watch for me on there. The best way is check out my website, ednakeep.com. They can reach out to me. I have some criteria before people can actually book a call with me, but they'll find that on my website. I like to know that they're qualified. They're really serious about taking things to the next level, and I have certain questions that I ask and stuff like that.
I love it. I always want to make sure that people know where the resource is, how they get it. Obviously, we'll put it in the show notes, but ednakeep.com. I love that. Thank you for sharing it. Okay, question number 1. Our show and our real estate brokerage is called Calibrate Real Estate. Calibrate is one of these great words. It's a verb. A lot of real estate companies are based on nouns or something that's maybe altruistic. Calibrate is very much all about mindset. It's all about how do we iterate? How do we take results, measure them against a standard, and try to create a better outcome next time around? A lot of scientists use it. A lot of engineers use it. So I always like to ask our top performers, our influencers that we interview on this show, how do you calibrate your life on a daily basis, Edna?
Action. You know what? If you're not taking action towards your goal every single day, you're going backwards. And relentless pursuit is another thing. Set that goal and then just friggin' go for it. Whatever you need to do to get there, do it. But you don't get to just sit and think about it. You don't just get to learn a concept and not do something with it, because you're stuck. You're stuck if you're doing that. So take what you actually learn and take action on it. And also inspired action. I'm a big believer in, spending some time in silence and meditating and in inwardness every day, so that you can get downloads from the universe that says, okay, what do I need to do? If I'm going to take a quantum leap in my life and make big changes, what do I need to do? I think that's how I got introduced to that book of Dan Sullivan. I haven't been around him for a long time. And the who, not how, I read the book, and one of the parts in the book that really resonated with me, and I took action immediately, was the author said, I hired a dedicated person to get me on podcasts. And initially my goal was 200 a year, and then I changed it to 600 a year. And, I've actually hired a group to get me on podcasts. I pay for 3 a month. And I thought, I was thinking of increasing that. How about I hire a full-time person to get me on podcasts? And I reached out because I already had somebody working with me. She wasn't working with me full-time. I said, hey, can you talk? And she said, yep. So she phoned me and I hired her on the spot. And, that's the kind of stuff, who, not how. That's inspired action. I read that. I went, wow. I was just thinking about how can I increase my audience through other people's podcasts. Let's hire somebody full-time to do that for me.
Great advice. Our next question, you've touched on this a little bit as you're a coach, and it's natural to do that. But our next question comes from a song that I really enjoy called Dear Younger Me. The songwriter is writing to themselves now that they've lived some life, have some scars, have some bumps and bruises. And it's this juxtaposition of, if I could write to myself when I was younger, would I give myself some advice to avoid some of these things? Or are those things that actually made me who I am today? And was it meant to be? And so I always like to ask the question, if you could go back in time, if you take a time machine back to Edna when she was, in high school, or, obviously a single mom, what are some things that you would share with yourself today with that knowledge that you had if you could go back in time?
Okay, 2 things. 1, stop worrying about what other people think of you. They think less of you than you think so. And especially when you're young, right, Kyle? You think everybody's like focused on your life. They're not. They're focused on their own life. Yeah, you might be topic of conversation, which I was when I was pregnant at age 16. But instead of dwelling on that and thinking, oh my gosh, I'm such a bad person, I did all this wrong, let it go. The faster you can let it go, the better off you can be. Having a child at that age actually ended up being one of the best things that could ever happen to me, because then I was no longer thinking about just me. So let that go. Stop worrying about what other people think of you, because first of all, they probably don't. And second of all, their opinion doesn't matter. Only your opinion matters. And the sooner you wrap your head around that, the better off you're going to be too.
Really sage advice, and it's hard to do even for someone who's been there, done that, because there are people that we're in a culture, especially, where anybody can make a comment, anybody can tweet, anybody can do whatever, and those things can knock you down. So it's a great reminder. My final question is actually in memory of my coach, who passed away at a young age a couple of years ago. We've talked a lot about coaching and the influence that coaches have. We're well over 170 episodes now, and please take a moment to rate, subscribe, review if you're new to the show. But if I go all the way back to episode 5, I had a great piece of advice from my career coach who was in a mentoring group when he was in his 20s. And his answer to that Dear Younger Me question was, write your own obituary, which is actually an exercise that he got from a book that he read with this mentoring group. So I've liked to twist this a little bit, because Chris Oakley lived on mission for over a decade after having that exercise of kind of thinking of the end in mind. And he really lived on mission because of it. So now I like to ask people in memory of Chris, what would you want your legacy to be? Hopefully it's decades from now, maybe like Dan Sullivan, you're in your 150s or whatever, but what would you like to be known for, remembered by, if someone that was really close to you, Edna, were to deliver your eulogy at your funeral?
This one's actually very emotional to me because it happened with one of my mentors. I liked me best when I was with her.
Yeah, and that is the exact way I felt about Chris. I've got a couple of other coaches that I feel about that way too. And making someone feel like they're the best version of themselves when they're with you, gosh, that would be just a wonderful legacy, and something really worthwhile striving for. Edna, wow, this has been action packed. We've definitely sat on top of the mountaintop together, and as we come down, I just have to say thank you for your time, your energy, your effort. Go get her book. It's going to be in the show notes. But if you're looking at investing in real estate, learning how to be an entrepreneur in real estate, sourcing capital, sourcing deals, Edna Keep, thank you so much for your time, for your energy. I'm Kyle Malnati, your gracious host of the Calibrate Real Estate Podcast. Ed and I will see you around the neighborhood. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Kyle.